I never thought I'd be standing here, watching my childhood home being auctioned off to the highest bidder. The grand Victorian mansion where I once slept in the garage while my brother Marcus lounged in his private suite. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. My name is Oliver Chin, and this is the story of how I went from sleeping on a garage floor to owning the very house my parents used to torment me with. It all started 15 years ago when I turned 16. Until then, I'd shared a small bedroom with my younger brother Marcus. It wasn't ideal, but it was home. That all changed when Dad's company started taking off. Suddenly, our modest house wasn't good enough anymore. They bought this massive Victorian mansion in the most expensive part of town. 5 bedrooms, a pool, and a 3-car garage. I still remember the day we moved in. Mom was practically floating as she gave us the tour. And this, she announced, opening a door to reveal a massive bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, is Marcus's suite. Marcus, 14 at the time, immediately claimed the space, running around like he owned the place. I stood in the doorway, waiting to see my room. That's when Dad cleared his throat. "Oliver," he said, his voice oddly stiff, "you'll be staying in the garage." I thought he was joking. The garage? But one look at his face told me he was serious. "We need the other bedrooms," Mom explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your father's business partners often stay over, and Marcus needs space for his music." Marcus's music consisted of occasionally strumming a guitar he'd begged for but never learned to play properly. Meanwhile, I was maintaining straight A's while working part-time at a local electronics store. The garage was exactly what you'd expect, cold, damp, and smelling of motor oil. They set up a fold-out cot in the corner, behind Dad's precious Mercedes. "We'll renovate it soon," Mom promised. They never did. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of the garage door opening as Dad left for work. In winter, the temperature would drop so low I could see my breath. I'd wrap myself in every blanket I owned, trying to stay warm while listening to Marcus play video games in his heated suite above. But I didn't just survive in that garage, I thrived. I turned it into my sanctuary. Between the cars, I set up a small desk I'd rescued from a neighbor's trash. I studied there late into the night, using the dim light from a cheap lamp I'd bought with my own money. The cold taught me resilience, the solitude gave me focus, and the humiliation fueled my determination. While Marcus was given everything, private tutors, expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, I worked. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account I kept secret from my family. They never asked where I worked or what I did with my money. To them, I was just the disappointment who lived in the garage. Oliver's always been different. I'd overhear Mom telling her friends at their fancy dinner parties. Not ambitious like Marcus. "You know, he actually likes living in the garage. Says it gives him independence." She'd laugh, and her friends would join in, all of them sipping expensive wine in the warmth of the house while I huddled under blankets just feet away. The turning point came during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. Not that my parents knew. They were too busy celebrating Marcus's acceptance into the local community college. The night before I left for college, Dad called me into his study. The room was massive, with leather-bound books he'd never read and awards he'd bought to impress clients. "Oliver," he said, not looking up from his computer, "your mother and I have been talking. We think it's best if you don't come back during breaks." I stood there, letting his words sink in. "The garage will be needed for storage," he continued, still not meeting my eyes. "And frankly, it doesn't look good having you here. Marcus is starting to build connections and, well, you understand." I did understand. I understood perfectly. "Of course," I replied calmly. "I won't be coming back." He finally looked up, surprised by my easy agreement. For a moment, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. But then he just nodded and went back to his computer. That was the last real conversation I had with my father for 15 years. I left for MIT the next morning. No one came to say goodbye. I took everything I owned, which wasn't much, and walked out of that garage without looking back. My secret savings account held exactly $15,482.63, every dollar earned while living among the motor oil and winter frost. What my family didn't know was that I'd been doing more than just working retail. Those long nights in the garage hadn't just been spent studying. I'd been teaching myself programming, developing apps, and building a client base for freelance web development. By the time I left for college, I had already launched 2 successful mobile apps under a pseudonym. At MIT, I flourished. Without the constant reminder of my family's disdain, I could finally focus entirely on my goals. I graduated early, top of my class, with job offers from every major tech company in Silicon Valley. But I had different plans. Remember those apps I developed in the garage? They were just the beginning. During college, I'd expanded my tech portfolio, investing every spare dollar into development. By graduation, my company, Garage Start Tech, was worth $5 million, though it wasn't public knowledge who owned it. I rented a small apartment in San Francisco, living well below my means while my company grew. Every time I was tempted to buy something expensive, I remembered the cold nights in the garage and put the money into my business instead. Years passed. I heard bits and pieces about my family through distant relatives. Marcus had dropped out of college, but Mom and Dad kept supporting him. They bought him a small mansion next door, paid for his failed business ventures, covered his gambling debts. All while my father's company expanded, riding the wave of a booming economy. Then came 2008. The financial crisis hit like a tsunami, and my father's company wasn't prepared. He'd overleveraged everything, taking out massive loans to maintain their lavish lifestyle and cover Marcus's mounting debts. When the market crashed, it all came crumbling down. I watched from afar as they desperately tried to keep up appearances. The fancy cars started disappearing one by one. Marcus's mansion was sold at a loss. Mom's social media posts became less frequent, no more photos of expensive vacations or designer shopping sprees. Then I saw the notice. Their house, my old house, was going up for auction. The same house where I'd spent 2 years sleeping in the garage. The same garage where I'd built the foundation of my now $100 million tech company. Standing here now, watching potential buyers mill around the property, I feel strangely calm. Nobody recognizes me. Why would they? The Oliver they knew was just the boy from the garage. Now I'm CEO of one of the fastest growing tech companies in Silicon Valley, though my name rarely appears in the press. I adjust my simple black suit, bought off the rack at Macy's, and wait for the auction to begin. Through the crowd, I spot them, Mom, Dad, and Marcus, standing together looking shell-shocked. They haven't noticed me yet. They have no idea that the son they banished to the garage has returned, checkbook in hand, ready to buy back every cold night, every humiliation, every dismissive glance. The auctioneer steps up to the podium, and I take a deep breath. It's time to show my family exactly what the boy from the garage has become. The auction room crackled with tension as the auctioneer began his introduction. My parents huddled together near the front, Mom clutching Dad's arm like a lifeline. Marcus stood slightly apart, his designer clothes now looking worn and dated. None of them had spotted me yet. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer's voice boomed through the room. We're here today for the sale of 1447 Highland Avenue, a Victorian mansion with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a 3-car garage. He emphasized the word garage, and I couldn't help but smile. The bidding started at $2 million, less than half what my parents had paid for it. I watched as a few hands went up tentatively. My father's face grew paler with each bid, watching his precious mansion being haggled over like a yard sale item. $2.5 million, called out a man in an expensive suit. $2.7, countered a woman near the window. I waited patiently, letting them drive up the price. My hand stayed down, my expression neutral. Years of hiding my success had made me an expert at being invisible when needed. $3.2 million, the man in the suit again. Mom was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. Marcus had pulled out his phone, probably trying to look uninterested, but his hands were shaking. $3.5 million, said the woman by the window. The room fell silent. The auctioneer looked around, his gavel raised. $3.5 million going once. I raised my hand. $5 million. The room gasped. My voice, clear and confident, cut through the silence like a knife. For the first time in 15 years, my parents turned and looked directly at me. The recognition wasn't immediate. They saw a man in a simple but well-tailored suit, standing with the quiet confidence that only true success can bring. Then Mom's eyes widened. Dad's jaw dropped. Marcus actually took a step backward. Oliver? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I kept my eyes on the auctioneer. $5 million, cash offer, no contingencies. I can close immediately. The auctioneer, sensing the drama but maintaining his professionalism, looked around the room. $5 million. Going once. Going twice. The man in the expensive suit shook his head slightly. The woman by the window had already gathered her things. Sold. To the gentleman in the black suit. I walked to the front of the room, pulling out my checkbook. My parents stood frozen, watching as I wrote out a check for $5 million with the same casual ease they once used to dismiss me to the garage. Oliver, Dad finally managed to speak. How? Where did you? I handed the check to the auction manager. I believe you'll find everything in order. I'd like to take possession immediately. Of course, sir. We can handle the paperwork right now. Mom stepped forward, her hand reaching out but not quite touching me. Oliver, sweetheart, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? I turned to face them fully for the first time. Tell you what, that the sum you banished to the garage built a $100 million tech company, that every cold night, every humiliation, every dismissal only made me work harder, would you have cared? Marcus snorted, trying to maintain his facade of indifference. $100 million? Yeah, right. If you're so rich, why are you wearing a cheap suit? I smiled, pulling out my phone and pulling up my company's website, Garage Start Tech. Look it up. I named it that to remind myself where I came from. Where you put me. Dad's face went from pale to ashen as recognition dawned. Garage Start Tech was all over the financial news lately. Our latest app had revolutionized the industry. He probably read about us, never knowing his garage-rolling son was the CEO. That's your company, he stammered. Yes. Built from nothing, in your garage, while Marcus was playing guitar in his heated suite. I turned to the auction manager. Is there somewhere private where we can complete the paperwork? Oliver, wait. Mom stepped forward again. We're about to be homeless. Surely you wouldn't. We're family. I paused, letting her words hang in the air. Family? Was I family when you put me in the garage? When you told me not to come home from college? When you never once called or checked on me for 15 years? Tears welled up in her eyes. We were wrong. We see that now. Please. The garage is still there, I said quietly. It's quite spacious, as I recall. Good for building a business. Good for building character. Dad's face darkened. You're really going to throw your own parents out on the street? After everything we did for you? I couldn't help but laugh. Everything you did for me? You gave me a garage and cold nights and endless reminders that I wasn't good enough. And you know what? You were right. I wasn't good enough. I was better. I turned back to the auction manager, but then stopped. You know, it's interesting. All those years in the garage, I kept thinking you'd realize how wrong you were. That you'd apologize, invite me back into the house, be actual parents. But you never did. You were too busy buying Marcus mansions and covering his gambling debts. Marcus flinched. How did you know about? I know everything. Every loan, every failed business, every credit card bill they paid for you. I've been watching, waiting, wondering if any of you would ever change. But you didn't. You just kept taking and taking until there was nothing left to take. Mom was openly sobbing now. Please, Oliver, we'll do anything. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket. There's a small apartment building on Oak Street. Not fancy, but clean and well-maintained. I own it. There's a 2-bedroom unit available. The lease agreement is in here, along with enough cash for 6 months' living expenses. They stared at the envelope, then at me. You're not sleeping in my garage, I continued. But you're not sleeping on the street either. Consider it a chance to start over. To learn what it's like to live without everything being handed to you. Dad reached for the envelope with trembling hands. Oliver, don't thank me. This isn't forgiveness. This is me being better than you were. You have until the end of the week to move out of the mansion. The apartment will be ready tomorrow. I signed the final papers for the house and walked out, leaving them standing in the auction room. As I reached my car, a modest hybrid, not a Mercedes, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Marcus. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I was a spoiled brat. I never thought about what it was like for you in that garage. I studied my brother's face, seeing for the first time not the golden child who could do no wrong, but a man who had never learned to stand on his own feet. The apartment has 2 bedrooms, I said. Stay with them, help them adjust. Learn to live within your means. Maybe then we can talk about being family again. He nodded, understanding the opportunity I was offering. As I drove away from the auction house, I thought about that garage. Tomorrow, I'd have contractors there to transform it into a state-of-the-art home office, a place where other young entrepreneurs could come to work, to dream, to build their own success stories. Because sometimes the worst places, the coldest spaces, the darkest corners are where the brightest futures are born. I know that better than anyone. After all, I'm the boy from the garage who came back to buy the mansion. The next morning, I stood in my new home office, the former garage, looking at the space where my cot used to be. The contractors would arrive soon to begin the renovation. But for now, it was exactly as I remembered it. Cold, dark, full of potential. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Mom and Dad are settled in the apartment. It's small but clean. Thank you. I didn't respond. They had their fresh start, and I had mine. The garage that was meant to break me had instead made me. And now, standing here in this space that held so many painful memories, I finally felt something I'd never expected. Peace. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about causing pain. It's about rising so far above it that those who hurt you become nothing more than a story you tell about where you started. A story about a garage, a determined teenager, and a $5 million auction that changed everything. The email from Blackwood Publishing sat unread in my inbox while my cousins mocked my failed writing career at our family's annual Christmas gathering. If they only knew they were desperately trying to acquire rights to my latest novel. My name is Anna Morgan, though millions of readers know me as A.R. Winter, the mysterious author whose identity has become publishing's biggest secret. My family just knows me as their disappointing relative who wastes time writing stories. Still working on that great American novel, Anna? My cousin James smirked from his position on the leather sofa. As CEO of Blackwood Publishing, he never missed a chance to remind everyone of his success. Or have you finally decided to get a real job? I took a sip of wine, thinking about the 7-figure offers sitting in my agent's inbox, including one from Blackwood that James had personally signed. But I kept quiet, just as I have for the past 3 years. Anna, my Aunt Margaret sighed, we're just concerned. You can't keep living in that tiny apartment, working at the bookstore, dreaming about being a writer. Look at James and Olivia, they'd made something of themselves. I glanced at my cousins, James with his publishing empire, Olivia with her literary agency. Both of them had inherited their positions in the family business, Blackwood Publishing, founded by my Uncle Robert. Both of them had rejected my manuscript 5 years ago without even reading it. The bookstore pays the bills, I said quietly, remembering the day everything changed. I'd been shelving books at the Dusty Spine, the small independent bookstore where I worked, when I got the idea for what would become my first bestseller. The store's owner, Eleanor Chin, found me scribbling in my notebook during my lunch break. Instead of scolding me, she sat down and asked about my story. That conversation changed my life. You need a pen name, Eleanor had said after reading my first chapters. Something mysterious, something that makes people wonder. She was right. A.R. Winter was born that day, and my first novel, Shadows of Yesterday, took the publishing world by storm. No one knew the author's identity. My contract specified complete anonymity, with all communications handled through Eleanor, who had become my manager. Have you read the new A.R. Winter book? Olivia asked James, pulling me back to the present. Everyone's talking about it. We've made 3 offers, but their agent won't even take our calls. I hid my smile behind my wine glass. Olivia's agency had actually made 4 offers, each higher than the last. Whoever they are, they're being ridiculous, James growled. Every publisher in New York wants that book. The film rights alone would be worth millions. If only they knew they were talking about the manuscript they'd thrown in the reject pile 5 years ago. The same story, just with a different title and a mysterious author's name. Maybe they're waiting for the right offer, I suggested mildly. James laughed. What would you know about publishing deals, Anna? You can barely get your stories posted on those free writing websites. That was their perception of me, the failed writer who posted stories online while working a dead-end job. They had no idea that A.R. Winter's online presence was carefully crafted misdirection, building anticipation for each new release. Speaking of publishing, my Uncle Robert joined the conversation. James tells me your little bookstore might have to close soon. Such a shame. My hands tightened around my glass. The Dusty Spine was struggling, not because of poor business, but because Blackwood Publishing had bought the building and was raising the rent to impossible levels. They wanted to turn it into another chain bookstore. "We're doing fine," I said, though my heart ached. Eleanor was in her 70s now, and the stress of fighting the rent increases was taking its toll. "You should let us help you find a real position," Olivia offered with fake sympathy. "Blackwood always needs people in the mailroom." I thought about the manuscript sitting in my laptop bag, the final book in my trilogy, the one every publisher in New York was fighting over. The one that would expose corruption in the publishing industry based on everything I'd seen working at the Dusty Spine. "Actually," I said, standing up, "I should get back to the store. Eleanor needs help with inventory." On Christmas Eve, James rolled his eyes. "That's sad, even for you, Anna." I left them to their expensive wines and self-congratulation, driving my old Honda back to the Dusty Spine. Eleanor was waiting, a knowing smile on her face. "How was the family gathering?" she asked, pouring us both tea in her office above the store. "They're still trying to buy your building," I told her, "and they're desperate to get the rights to A.R. Winter's new book." She laughed, the sound warm and knowing. If they only knew their failed writer cousin was the one they were begging to sign with them. I pulled out my laptop, opening the manuscript that would change everything. "The final book is ready. Are you sure you want to do this?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Expose how big publishers crush independent bookstores while exploiting authors." "My dear, I've been waiting for this moment for 40 years. We had planned it carefully. The first 2 books in my trilogy had built a massive following, with readers desperate to know how the story ended. The final book would reveal how the villain, a publishing mogul who destroyed independent bookstores, was based on real events." "Blackwood made another offer today," I said, checking my email. 8 figures, plus film rights. And I'm going to turn them down. Again." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "They never understood, did they? That success isn't just about money. It's about telling the truth, even when the truth hurts." I thought about James and Olivia, about how they laughed at my dreams while sitting in offices their father had given them. They thought being born into publishing royalty made them experts on good writing. "The advance copies go out next week," I said. "Once the reviews start coming in, they'll realize they're the villains in their own story," Eleanor finished. "And the best part? They'll have to sell it in their bookstores anyway, because their shareholders won't let them ignore the biggest release of the year." My phone buzzed. Another email from James, marked urgent. Another offer, this one even higher. He was getting desperate. "Your cousins are about to learn a very expensive lesson," Eleanor said, reading over my shoulder. "Never underestimate a writer with a story to tell." I closed my laptop, thinking about the launch party planned for next month. A.R. Winter would finally be revealed, not at some fancy Manhattan publishing house, but at the Dusty Spine. "They're not going to know what hit them," I said quietly. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "That's the beauty of it, my dear. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late to stop it." She was right. The wheels were already in motion, and soon the entire publishing world would know exactly who A.R. Winter was, and why she had chosen to tell this particular story. The best revenge, after all, isn't served cold. It's published in hardcover, with your cousin's company logo on the spine. The day everything changed started normally enough. I was shelving books at the Dusty Spine when James burst through the door, his designer suit looking oddly out of place among our worn wooden shelves. "Where's the old lady?" he demanded, clutching a copy of Publishers Weekly. "We need to talk about selling this place now." Eleanor emerged from her office, calm as ever. "James Blackwood. To what do we owe this pleasure?" He thrust the magazine at her. "Your rent problems are solved. Name your price for the building. Any price." I picked up the magazine he dropped. There it was, the announcement I'd been waiting for. A.R. Winter's final book launch set for independent bookstore. The Dusty Spine has been chosen as the exclusive venue for A.R. Winter's first and only public appearance, Eleanor said smoothly. "Quite an honor, don't you think?" James's face reddened. "This is impossible. That launch belongs at Blackwood's flagship store. We've offered millions for the rights." "And yet," Eleanor smiled, "A.R. Winter chose us. Small world, isn't it?" I continued shelving books, hiding my smile as James made call after call, trying to change the venue. But the contracts were already signed, the press releases sent. The biggest literary event of the year would happen right here, in the store his company had tried to destroy. Anna, he finally noticed me. Don't you have somewhere else to be? This is a private business discussion. I checked my watch. Actually, I do. I have a meeting about my new book. He snorted. Finally writing children's stories where you belong. Something like that, I said, picking up my laptop bag. As I passed Eleanor, she gave me a tiny wink. The meeting was with my agent, finalizing details for the revelation that would shake the publishing world. My final book wasn't just the conclusion of a trilogy. It was an expose of the industry itself, wrapped in a compelling narrative that would keep readers up all night. Blackwood Publishing's stock dropped again. My agent informed me. They're desperate for a hit. Your cousin's jobs are on the line. How desperate? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Desperate enough to sign a contract without reading the book first. They're that confident A.R. Winter can save their company. I pulled out the contract they'd sent, the one offering unprecedented terms for a book they hadn't seen. Let's give them exactly what they want. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. The Dusty Spine was transformed, though we kept its essential character. Every major media outlet requested coverage of the revelation. Betting pools started on A.R. Winter's identity, with theories ranging from famous actors to reclusive billionaires. The morning of the event, I arrived early to find James and Olivia already there, arguing with Eleanor. We have a right to know who they are before the announcement, Olivia insisted. We're their publisher. The contract specifically states the publisher learns the author's identity along with everyone else, Eleanor replied calmly. Unless you want to breach the agreement. They backed down. They couldn't risk losing the book now. Their jobs depended on its success. As the store filled with journalists, industry executives, and lucky readers who'd won tickets to the event, I slipped upstairs to change. The simple bookstore clerk's clothes were replaced by a tailored suit. When I looked in the mirror, I finally saw myself as both Anna Morgan and A.R. Winter. No more hiding. Eleanor took the podium at exactly noon. Welcome to a historic moment in publishing. Today, A.R. Winter will not only reveal their identity, but will read the first chapter of their new book. A story that will change how we see the publishing industry forever. I watched from the back as she continued. But first, let me tell you a story about a young writer who came to work in my bookstore. A writer whose manuscript was rejected by every major publisher, including some in this room. James and Olivia shifted uncomfortably in their front row seats. This writer didn't give up. Instead, she watched and learned as those same publishers tried to destroy independent bookstores like ours. She turned that experience into something extraordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome A.R. Winter, or as some of you know her, Anna Morgan. The silence was absolute as I walked to the podium. James's face went pale. Olivia dropped her phone. Hello, cousins, I said into the microphone. Surprised to see me? The room erupted in chaos. Journalists started shouting questions. Cameras flashed, but I kept my eyes on my family. The final book in the trilogy is called Empire of Pages. I continued. It's about a young bookseller who discovers how major publishers conspire to destroy independent bookstores. Every event in the book is based on real documents, real emails, real conversations. Some of you may recognize yourselves in these pages. I opened the manuscript and began to read. With each word, I watched the blood drain from James and Olivia's faces as they recognized their own schemes laid bare. You can't publish this. James stood up, his voice shaking. We have a contract. Yes, you do, I agreed. A contract you signed without reading the book. A contract that gives me complete creative control and protection against litigation as long as everything I've written is true. Is it true, James? He sank back into his seat. The media coverage was immediate and explosive. Publishing Harris' secret behind best-selling trilogy. A.R. Winter exposes industry corruption. Blackwood Publishing in crisis as tell-all book reveals dark practices. The book debuted at number 1. Independent bookstores across the country held midnight release parties. The Dusty Spine became a tourist attraction, with readers traveling from around the world to visit the store that sparked the story. Blackwood Publishing's board of directors called an emergency meeting. By the end of the week, James and Olivia had been removed from their positions. The company announced a new initiative supporting independent bookstores, trying desperately to salvage their reputation. Was it worth the wait? Eleanor asked me one evening as we sat in her office counting pre-orders. I looked around at the store we'd saved, thought about the other independent bookstores that would survive because of what we'd exposed. Every second, I replied. My family doesn't hold Christmas gatherings anymore. James took a job at a small literary agency in Boston. Olivia started her own publishing consultation firm, though most major publishers won't work with her. The Dusty Spine is thriving. I bought the building with my royalties, ensuring it will remain an independent bookstore forever. Eleanor still works the register sometimes, telling customers the story of how a failed writer became the industry's biggest success. Last week, a young girl came into the store clutching a notebook full of stories. I recognized that look in her eyes, the same one I had all those years ago. Keep writing, I told her, signing her copy of my book. And remember, sometimes the best stories are the ones waiting to be told. As for A.R. Winter, she's working on a new series. This time, I'm not hiding who I am. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in getting revenge, but in proving that success comes in many forms, even from behind the shelves of a dusty old bookstore. The best stories, after all, are the ones that remind us that truth, like the best written characters, eventually finds its way to the light. Hi, I'm James Martinez, and this is the story of how my stepfamily's greed became their biggest downfall. They thought they were getting a failing restaurant, but they didn't realize what they were really buying, or rather, what they weren't. My father's restaurant, Casa Martinez, had been the heart of downtown Chicago for 30 years. It wasn't just a business. It was our family's legacy, built from the recipes my grandmother brought from Mexico and the dreams my father carried when he immigrated here with nothing but hope in his pockets. I grew up in that kitchen, learning every recipe, every secret, every tiny detail that made our food special. The smell of roasting chilies and fresh tortillas was the soundtrack of my childhood. But everything changed when my mother passed away, and 2 years later, my father married Diana. Diana came with 2 sons from her previous marriage, Marcus and Alex. From day one, they looked at Casa Martinez not as a family legacy, but as a gold mine waiting to be exploited. They saw our loyal customers, our prime location, our reputation, and they wanted it all. At first, they played nice. Diana would help at the restaurant, learning the operations while her sons took management positions. My father, still grieving and lonely, was just happy to have a full house again. I watched it all from the kitchen, where I worked as head chef, keeping my mother's recipes alive. James, honey, Diana would say, her voice sweet as syrup, but her eyes cold as ice. Don't you think it's time to modernize? These old recipes, they're so traditional. People want fusion cuisine now. But our customers didn't want fusion. They came for my grandmother's mole sauce, for the tamales that took 2 days to prepare, for the traditions that made Casa Martinez special. Our revenue proved it. We were doing better than ever. Then my father got sick. Cancer, aggressive and unforgiving. Everything happened so fast. Between hospital visits and chemotherapy sessions, Diana and her son started making changes. They hired new staff, changed suppliers, and slowly pushed me away from operational decisions. Just focus on cooking, James, Marcus would say, waving away my concerns about their expensive renovations. Leave the business to those who understand it. I had a business degree from Northwestern and had practically run the restaurant for the past 5 years. But they conveniently forgot that. One night, as I was closing up, I overheard Diana and her sons in the office. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their words froze me in place. The lawyer says we can do it, Diana was saying. Robert's too sick to properly manage his assets. If we can prove the restaurant is failing, we can get emergency power of attorney and force a sale before he recovers, if he recovers. But it's not failing, Alex objected. It's making more money than ever. That's why we need to help it fail, Marcus replied with a laugh. A few health code violations, some bad reviews, a couple of convenient kitchen accidents. I felt sick to my stomach. They were planning to deliberately tank my father's life's work. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They underestimated how much I'd learned over the years. What they didn't know was that 6 months earlier, when my father first got his diagnosis, he had signed over several key aspects of the business to me. Not the building or the restaurant itself. He wanted those to stay in his name until he was gone. But he gave me something far more valuable. I spent the next few weeks watching as they executed their plan. Suddenly we had health code violations. Mysterious bad reviews appeared online. Equipment started breaking down mysteriously. Our reputation was taking hits, and I could see the stress wearing on my father. Deanna played her part perfectly, acting concerned and supportive, while suggesting that selling might be the best option. The stress isn't good for your health, darling, she'd tell my father. Let's just sell it and focus on your recovery. Finally, they made their move. At the hospital, with my father weak from chemotherapy, Diana brought in her lawyer. They had papers showing the restaurant's recent struggles, the mounting debts that they had created, and a proposal. Sell the restaurant now, to them, for a nominal fee of $1, to keep it in the family. My father, tired and confused, looked at me. James, what do you think? Diana jumped in before I could answer. James understands this is for the best, don't you, James? You can still be the chef, if you prove yourself worthy of the position. I looked at my father, then at Diana's smug face, and nodded slowly. If that's what you want, Dad. The next day, we all gathered at the restaurant for the official handover. Diana had invited their friends, making it a celebration of their rescue of a failing family business. The lawyer laid out the papers as Diana practically bounced with glee. Just sign here, James, she said, pointing to the line at the bottom of the transfer document. It's only worth $1 now anyway, thanks to your inadequate management. I signed my name with a steady hand, then looked up at their triumphant faces. Congratulations, I said quietly. The building and business are yours. Finally, Marcus exclaimed. Now we can make some real changes around here. I packed up my personal items from the office, including my mother's old recipe box. As I headed for the door, Diana called out, "Don't forget to be here early tomorrow. Just because you're not the owner anymore doesn't mean you can slack off." I turned back with a small smile. "Oh, I won't be coming in tomorrow, or ever again, actually." "What are you talking about?" Alex demanded. "You see," I said, "you just bought a building and a business name. But 6 months ago, my father transferred something else to me. I own all the recipes, every single one. They're fully copyrighted and trademarked under my personal holding company. I also own the Casa Martinez brand identity, logo, and most importantly," I paused, watching their faces, "I own all the supplier contracts and relationships personally." The color drained from Diana's face as I continued. "So congratulations on your new restaurant. I'm sure you'll do great serving whatever it is you plan to serve. It just won't be Casa Martinez food. Oh, and those suppliers you've been working with. They'll be delivering to my new location across town starting tomorrow." The silence that followed was deafening. Diana's perfectly manicured hands gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles turning white. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Those recipes belong to the restaurant." Actually, I pulled out another set of documents from my briefcase. They don't. Everything was legally transferred to Martinez Culinary Group, LLC, my company, months ago. Dad knew what he was doing. He might be sick, but he's far from stupid. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing my shirt. "You little snake. You planned this all along." "Careful," I warned calmly. "Assault charges wouldn't look good for your new business. And yes, I planned this right after I overheard you plotting to deliberately tank my father's legacy." Their lawyer, Mr. Peterson, was frantically flipping through the sale documents. This is highly unusual," he stammered. "The intellectual property should have been included in the sale." "Check page 37, I suggested. "The sale clearly specifies physical assets and business name only. You really should read the fine print more carefully." Diana's face contorted with rage. "We'll sue you." "Well, sue me for what?" I interrupted. "For legally protecting my family's heritage? For stopping you from destroying what my father built?" "Go ahead." "Oh, and while you're at it, you might want to explain to the judge how you manipulated a cancer patient into selling his life's work for $1. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "One more thing. I've submitted all documentation of your deliberate health code violations to the city health department. They're very interested in speaking with the new owners. I'd expect them first thing tomorrow morning." As I walked out of Casa Martinez for the last time, I heard Diana's anguished scream of rage. But I didn't look back. I had work to do. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. While Diana and her son struggled with health department investigations and tried to create new recipes for their empty restaurant, I was busy building something new. I opened Mama Martinez's kitchen just across town, taking our loyal staff, suppliers, and most importantly, our recipes with me. The grand opening was packed with familiar faces, customers who'd been coming to us for decades, who knew the taste of our authentic food couldn't be replicated. Word spread quickly. Food critics raved about how we'd preserved the traditional flavors while upgrading to a beautiful new location. Our old customers followed us, bringing new ones with them. Within months, we had lines out the door every weekend. Meanwhile, Diana's version of Casa Martinez floundered. Without our recipes, suppliers, or experienced staff, they couldn't recreate what made the restaurant special. They tried serving generic Mexican food, then attempted fusion cuisine, but nothing worked. The reviews were brutal. "It's like a soul has been ripped out of the place," one reviewer wrote. "The magic is gone." 3 months after their takeover, my father's cancer went into remission. The doctors called it a miracle, but I think it was pure stubbornness. He wasn't going to let go until he saw justice served. The first day he was strong enough, he came to Mama Martinez's kitchen. He walked through the dining room, tears in his eyes, touching the familiar decorations we'd moved from the old place. The photos of our family, the hand-painted plates my mother had collected, the string of peppers my grandmother had hung for good luck. In the kitchen he watched as I prepared his favorite dish, chile en nogada, just like his mother taught me. "You did good, Mio," he said softly. "You protected our legacy better than I ever could." Diana and her sons tried to hold out, but the numbers didn't lie. 6 months after their triumphant takeover, they were forced to sell the building, at a massive loss. The final insult? The buyer was my newly formed real estate company. I kept the building but leased the space to a local art gallery. Sometimes I walk by the old location, remembering the sounds and smells that filled it for so many years. The Casa Martinez sign is gone, but the memories remain. Last week, I received a letter from Diana's lawyer, offering to reconcile our differences and propose a partnership. I sent back a simple response. Some things aren't for sale at any price. Mama Martinez's kitchen has now expanded to 3 locations, each one serving the same recipes that my grandmother brought from Mexico all those years ago. My father, now fully recovered, comes in every Sunday to have lunch and tell stories to the customers about how it all began. As for Diana and her sons, last I heard, they left Chicago, their dreams of an easy takeover shattered. They learned the hard way that a restaurant isn't just a building or a business. It's the heart and soul that goes into every dish, the love passed down through generations, the traditions that can't be bought or stolen. Yesterday, a young culinary student asked me why I didn't just let them have the old restaurant and start fresh somewhere else. I showed her my mother's old recipe box, the pages worn and stained with decades of use. Because some legacies, I told her, are worth fighting for. The old Casa Martinez building still stands downtown, now filled with beautiful artwork instead of dining tables. But the real Casa Martinez, the soul of it, lives on in Mama Martinez's kitchen, where every dish we serve carries the story of a family that refused to be beaten, a legacy that couldn't be stolen, and the sweet taste of justice served piping hot. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but in our case, it was served at exactly 165 degrees Fahrenheit, just like my grandmother's perfect enchiladas.